Hey y'all, we're gonna be starting here in just a couple of minutes. We're just waiting on a few more people to come in, and then we're going to turn it over to Kate. Welcome if you're just joining us. We're gonna wait just a minute or two more as we have some more people joining, and then Kate is gonna take it over. All right, Kate, it's kind of slowed down some, so I'm gonna stop my share, and the floor is going to be yours.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining all of us for a seat at the table. We are delighted that on short notice, all of you wanted to participate today, so we're very grateful for your time. I wanted to start with reading a land acknowledgement provided by Drake University to begin our meeting today. We begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, unceded land of the Iowa, Sac, and Meskwaki peoples. We offer our respect to their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We recognize that our presence here today is the result of the ongoing exclusions and erasure of Indigenous peoples who are the original stewards of this land. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and traditional homelands and heard, let the ties these nations have to their traditional homelands be renewed and reaffirmed. I wanted to start with that today in order to really set the tone for this conversation in regard to equity in the arts. And we're going to start, again, I'm Kate Hightshoe. I wear a lot of different hats in the community. But today I'm here on behalf of the Des Moines Arts Festival and Bravo, and a greater discussion about cultural equity for our community. You know, one thing I want to address right away is that there has sort of been an ongoing conversation over the last year about diversity, equity, and inclusion in a lot of different spaces. But specifically, today we're here about the arts, culture, and heritage community. I've heard a lot of feedback from people wondering why all of a sudden there is sort of this reactionary push for diversity, equity, and inclusion in so many different spaces. And I just want to make sure that our audience today knows that actually for a lot of our arts organizations, strategically, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a part of the plan for quite some time. But of course, as we all know with 2020 and many of the things that we've all experienced in the last year have really shined a spotlight on the fact that we need to push forward with urgency. And so this is not so much a reaction, but simply accelerating and propping up what we feel is an urgent need to move the work forward. All of you did not come here to listen to me. You definitely wanted to hear from our expert panel. So with that, we're going to make some introductions. And I'd like to start with Andrea. Andrea, would you tell our audience who you are, why you're here today, and anything else that you'd like to share?
Okay, the whole unmute thing, yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea Wilson, and I am here. I am one of the peer facilitators with Artists Inc. and our new endeavor in Des Moines with the Des Moines Art Festival. But also I am an artist, of course. I'm a writer. I have written books, screenplays, plays, and I am on faculty. I'm the endowed chair of creative writing at Grandview University. And with that opportunity, I teach a lot of creative writing classes, as well as I get to teach playwriting and theater classes. And I've had the awesome opportunity to work with a couple of the really great and enjoyable theater companies here in Des Moines, Iowa. So I've worked with Pyramid and Tiffany Johnson, who's on this session. We got to do a great collaboration with Grandview for a play that I wrote called Wild Widow Poker that dealt with the civil rights movement. I also got to do a reading with the Iowa Stage Company. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we had to move it virtually, but I got to do that earlier this year. So it's been great collaborating with the various organizations that are here in Des Moines. So yes, I'm here. I also work at Grandview. I have a second role. I have an administrative role where I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion Initiatives. So I come here today to talk about what it's like to be an artist of color, as well as working institutionally to create opportunities that reflect diversity and inclusion.
Andrea, thank you so much. Beau, please, we are all excited to hear from you. Tell us who you are and why you're here today.
Thank you, Kate. Similarly to Dr. Wilson, I've cultivated a deeply collaborative practice. So I'm a composer by trade. That's my education, and have been working in a collaborative setting, primarily in public arts, working with choreographers, multimedia artists, sculptors, and sometimes my work mostly appears in a public setting. I like to activate public spaces, creating site-responsive music, but then also activating the space with movement, dance, sculpture. I also am a consultant for creative communities. I'm a little bit nervous. This is my first panel in Des Moines, Iowa. And I'm very excited to see everyone here. It's a really great group of people. So my consulting practice is primarily aimed at creative communities. So working with cultural institutions, museums, but also public institutions like libraries and also schools. So for them, I'm creating strategic plans, programming, opportunities for audience engagement and outreach, and community development. I also am on faculty at Northeastern College of Arts, Media and Design, teaching graduate level courses in strategic planning, audience engagement, advocacy for the arts, and also experiential study in arts administration, which is an independent study for grad students to create projects in real life, in real time, in partnership with other institutions throughout the city.
Beau, thank you so much. And thanks for your authenticity. We all have nerves occasionally. I've had my fair share of not just nerves, but virtual mishaps throughout our pandemic, and we all have. So thank you so much for being here today, Beau. The silence and unsilence thing, I'm going to get it together. Sally, we'd love to hear from you. Would you please introduce yourself? I'm sure that many of you know who Sally is, but we are so thrilled that you're here with us today, Sally.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. I'm delighted to see so many familiar faces and some new people. I'm Sally Dixon. I'm the Executive Director for Bravo Greater Des Moines. Our organization is best known for the grant making work that we do in the community. We reinvest funds from the local municipalities into arts, culture, and heritage nonprofit organizations. That's our mission and our charter. Last year, we were able to award about $5 million to those nonprofit organizations. So it is a significant platform that we have, and we're grateful for the more than 70 organizations we're able to support. The reason I'm here today is because I have a deep professional investment in the arts and cultural landscape and the evolution towards a more equitable space. We know we have opportunity in our grant making, and we are leveraging that. We are also doing other things, and Bravo is progressing and growing and evolving to recognize that there are ways to be responsive to achieving our mission and our goals without writing a single check to a single organization. So hopefully a little bit later, I'll have a chance to share some of that with you. We very deeply appreciate the opportunity to partner with many of the organizations on this call, including Stephen and the Des Moines Arts Festival. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sally. And last but not least, really the synergy that of this whole entire conversation and why we're here today. And that would be Stephen King and the Des Moines Arts Festival. Stephen, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Thank you to everybody for being here today. We are thrilled to be in a place where we can have this conversation and really lift up this incredibly important endeavor. I'm Stephen King. I'm the executive director of the Des Moines Arts Festival. That's what festivals and events has been a big part of my professional life. What many of you may or may not know, that I'm also degreed in theater. I have 2 theater degrees, a Bachelor of Fine Arts in theater and a master's in directing. So I have been involved, engaged with the arts pretty much since I was a sophomore in high school. It's been a really important part of my life. And one of the things that I cherish about the role that I'm currently in is that I get to continue to express myself, but also just be continually engaged with the arts, really, throughout my career. So I'm thrilled to be here with all of you, with Andrea, with Beau, with Sally, with you, Kate. Thank you so much, and to everybody else, welcome. We're glad you're here, and hopefully this is just the beginning of this important conversation.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So to kind of summarize, again, a seat at the table. I'd like to give you just a brief background of how we came to be able to offer this virtual event today. So again, as I was sharing with you earlier, diversity, equity, and inclusion within the arts space has been an ongoing conversation for some time, at least since I've been in Des Moines, which is going on about 7 years now. Everyone's kind of sharing their art story. So what is my interest? Well, I am on the board for Bravo, and I've worked closely with Stephen in regard to DEI work in this space for several years, being on that board. But I, like many of all of you, am an artist first and foremost. I have my degrees in music performance from the Conservatory of Music, University of Missouri, Kansas City. Oboe performance, don't judge me, I am a double reed player. For any of you that understand that world, Beau, stop laughing. So that's why this topic is near and dear to me. Stephen, as a continuation of our conversation and dialogue, reached out to me after our last Bravo meeting and said, Kate, I really want to try something different. Artist Inc., as you know, is going to be entering our community, and it's a tremendous opportunity. His concern was that if he sent out an email invite, there would be possibly a large segment of our community that may not find out about this unique opportunity. So really, a seat at the table, how did we come up with that? Well, as many of you know, in the DEI space, that's a common term. When you're trying to strategically build community, and you're trying to be intentional, diversity, equity, inclusion is absolutely critical. And when you know that you want to reach broad audiences and you want to be able to attract diverse talent to the conversation, to provide the education and information, sometimes you have to try new ways of communicating that. So we decided to do this online virtual event and invite as many people as we could to be a part of a dialogue. because what we don't want to have happen, and again, this is going to be ongoing in the Des Moines community. We don't want people to feel as though they did not hear the information, or they were not able to receive the information, or they were not a part of that inclusive conversation. So we thought we would try something new and offer this opportunity to engage in a dialogue so that anyone who's interested can come, listen, ask questions, and learn. So having said that, and meeting our expert panel today, we're going to get right into the heart of the matter a little bit. And I'm going to start with Andrea. Andrea, I keep picking on you, but that certainly is not a bad thing. So to start off, Andrea, talk to me about your perspective about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the art space. And really, from your perspective, what does that really embody? What does that mean to you? And, you know, how would you like to see this play out in our Des Moines community?
You know, the whole unmute thing. Thanks, Kate. And I don't mind you picking on me. My last name is W, so I'm usually used to going last. So, you know, it's good sometimes to be first.
Change it up, that's right.
So I think when we start the conversation about DEI, it's important to actually address what exactly is it. I know a lot of people think that all these three terms mean the exact same thing. So when we're talking about diversity, that first step is having the seat at the table, is making sure that diversity is making sure that the table itself has a space for everyone who wants to be there, and that, you know, different people of different cultures, backgrounds. And when we're talking about diversity, it's not just race. It's a bunch of other things, from sexual identity to religion to, you know, whatnot. We can go on and on with those different things, disabilities. So making sure that there are seats available for those people to be there, and that they are there. And then we move a little bit further with that. So inclusion is, you know, a lot of times people think diversity and inclusion is the same thing. Inclusion is actually where people at the table feel welcomed and valued. So that takes it a step up. So it's not just having people there, but actually, you know, are we really welcoming their ideas, their thoughts? Are we seeing those ideas and thoughts are just as valuable as anybody else's? Do they feel like their vote counts, their voice counts? Or are they just sitting at the table listening to everyone else? Or, you know, just getting their foot in the door, but that's it. And then we talk about equity, that moves it a little bit further, because now everyone has the exact same opportunities. So we're not, you know, kind of siding to one group or another, but everyone is making the same, has the same opportunities and chances. So I really wanted to start off talking about that, so that we understand that these words are not interchangeable, but that they all mean something different. So if we are striving for DEI, that means we are striving to not only have a seat at the table, but make sure everyone at the table is welcome, feels valued, and that everyone is actually getting the same opportunities and having the same treatment. With that being said, what does that look like for the arts community? It really means that everyone that is there, no matter, you know, what your background is, that you really feel like you can speak your truth and live your truth in your art. So a lot of times, you know, I can speak for myself as a Black woman. I may be concerned about submitting my work as a playwright to an organization that I know is predominantly white, especially because I write about the African-American community. All of my stories feature primarily African-American cast members. They usually talk about social issues, community issues, justice issues. So, you know, like I spoke about my play that I did with Tiffany Johnson that had to do with the civil rights movement. I mean, there's it follows history. It follows the year 1963, where there were some really great highs with like the March on Washington, but then there were the lows of the bombing at the church where the 4 young girls died, or the murder of Medgar Evers, sorry. So, you know, with all of that, if I'm submitting this to a company, you know, a production company to have this particular play staged, you know, are they going to be welcoming to this kind of artwork? Are they going to be like, oh no, you know, our patrons won't like this, and so we're scared to have these discussions? And so the more we really embrace DEI, the more our artists can feel comfortable and safe when it comes to writing about whatever their truth is, and submitting that, and knowing that that whatever the outcome is, whether they are accepted or rejected, that it's not based on the fact that we have gatekeepers kind of keeping certain art out. So I think to answer your question, it really has to do with us presenting a climate, you know, and fostering a climate where everyone feels safe to express that truth.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was a great way to kind of set up the conversation, because I do think these words get used interchangeably and there is confusion around that. In regard to the Des Moines community, you know, and I'm going to put you on the spot again, you know, when you talk about our climate here in the Des Moines community, how are we doing? How, you know, of course, everyone has room to grow. But what are your thoughts about the direction that you see leaders in our community taking to forward this work?
Well, I will admit I am a transplant. I've only been here about 3 years, but I see some good things, and I see some, of course, areas that need work. I think having a theater company like Pyramid is amazing. It's awesome, but it's only been around 5 or 6 years. So, you know, so they are still growing, still looking for, you know, ways to expand what they do, still trying to capture audiences, that type of thing. I've been able to, like I said, work with the Iowa Stage Center, Iowa Stage Company. And so, and working with them, I've gotten the chance to see them do some, you know, a variety of plays, and I've gotten to do some work with them as well. And so I do see that hand reaching out for that collaboration. So I do see some great things, even with this new Artist Inc. project, just that commitment to, we want to make sure that we embrace different kinds of artists, not just across the various forms of art, but also across cultural communities. The fact that we're having this conversation says a lot about the fact that we understand that we do need to work on inclusivity issues, equity issues, diversity issues. But I do think, you know, Iowa itself is a very, you know, white place. When I got the job at Grandview, not even when I got the job, I remember when I got the phone call about an interview. I don't even remember applying to a job in Iowa. I mean, I remember this job, but just not that it was in Iowa. And I remember when they answered the phone, well, after I got off the phone and they said, "Are you still interested?" I'm like, "Yeah," you know. And I hung up and I was like, "Where is this school?" And when I saw it was in Iowa, I was like, "There's no Black people in Iowa. I'm not going to Iowa," you know. But I came, and one thing that I found is, as I meet people, one of the first things people say to me is, "Why'd you come to Iowa?" You know, like, you know, that's that first thing. Like, "You were where?" And you came to Iowa. I came here from Georgia. But the second thing is usually like, "You're here in Iowa," as if having Black talent in Iowa is something strange. And so we need to normalize that. We need to get to a point where, you know, Latinx talent and, you know, talent from the LGBT community and whatever it is normal here, and not this big shocker that you could have a talented person here doing some talented things. When we did Wild Widow Poker, like, we got a huge community coming out and enjoying. It wasn't just the Grandview community, it was people from the community coming out to enjoy the play and being happy to see that it's not just only, you know, over the summer when Pyramid is doing their season, that there's work out here being done black artists and with Black characters and actors and whatnot, but that this is also spreading to the institutions here. So I think that we are, moving in the right direction, but of course, I think this kind of conversation continues to need to happen so that we can normalize it and it won't be such a shock.
Andrea, thank you. I love listening to you talk. We need to have coffee soon, but thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for coming to Iowa and being a transplant. And to that, in that regard, Beau, I'd like to kind of ask you, great opportunity for you to piggyback off of what Andrea has been talking about. So what is your role? How do you see our role, your role, in really moving the needle in doing this work? What does that look like to you?
I think it looks different for different people, right? So speaking only for myself, and like I said before, I have a deeply collaborative practice. And that means that I'm approaching collaboration with a great deal of curiosity, empathy, and to develop trusting and authentic relationships, whether it be a creative collaborator or a sponsor or a community partner. And to think that it's really important that as we're having these conversations that we embrace that curiosity as a practice, and that we embrace this level of curiosity that then leads to greater empathy, that leads to greater understanding, that leads to greater respect, and not just empathetic understanding, but actual knowledge, and really a critical knowledge of others' experiences. I can say, also like Dr. Wilson, I don't know if I can call myself a transplant. I was born and raised in Iowa, and then just recently moved back about a year and a half ago at this point. And the work that I was doing in Boston was very much centered around interdisciplinary collaboration, around social emotional learning, integrated learning. I was developing curriculum for independent schools as well as arts institutions. And this idea that social emotional learning is so very vital to not just curriculum development or to site responsive public art pieces that I'm working on as well, but also to leading to a more critical lens in collaboration and cross-institutional collaboration, no matter the project. And I feel like that's so very important to be rooted in that respect, and also to think that to say that all are welcome is not necessarily enough to be a passive verb, that you're welcome here, but it's an active verb, that it's active engagement, that it's going to places where people are and going to places where people feel comfortable.
Well, I think you're talking about intentionality here, and I love that. Talk to us about ways or strategies that you use or that you're compelled to explore in regard to being intentional about that journey for yourself.
Well, so I think that's a great question, Kate. And I think it looks different. Again, it's very personal, it's individual, right? Intention can be, again, really relying on that practice of curiosity, which to me is rooting yourself in a listening perspective and asking not just one follow-up question, but 4 or 5, and then also responding and training myself or practicing to say, well, what I'm hearing is, so it gives the opportunity for people to correct you, especially people who might not feel emboldened to correct someone else. You're giving an opportunity for a very deliberate 2 or 3-way conversation. Since moving back to Iowa, what it also means is modeling my behavior in a little bit different way. For example, in Boston, I didn't feel the need to say, well, yes, I'm a gay artist or I'm a gay composer. It was a situation where I just did the work that I did. There was representation from a lot of different communities, and I'd never really considered myself to be a composer or an artist where that was the subject matter, right? So I never, before Iowa, didn't really identify with that. Since moving here, I'm much more open about it. I'm much more, forthcoming of my other perspectives. And then also identifying that that's how I approach my work as well. Like I'm looking at things from a queer perspective. I'm looking at ways to solve problems through my identity, through innovative approaches to sort of like bending the rules to be more inclusive actively instead of passively. And that's through modeling behavior as well.
I
So,
love that, Beau. I really appreciate you being vulnerable and being transparent with your thoughts and your journey, your experiences here in this community. And I do want to give a little shout out here. I took a glimpse at who's on. So and this is not a pat on the back that Des Moines is doing so great. I think we have a lot of great things going on, like Dr. Wilson said, but there is room for improvement. But I do like to acknowledge that we have so many wonderful people and organizations here in the audience today, and make sure that I shout that out, because I think it's a testament to, again, the work that people know needs to be done and the direction in which we're going. Dwana, Juneteenth, Tiffany, Pyramid Theater, Des Moines Arts Center, Des Moines Symphony, Hy-Vee. There are so many amazing people on this call. So I'm just delighted that our community, in its diversity, feels that this is an important conversation to have today. So really just wanted to bring that to the forefront of this dialogue. But everyone's waiting to hear about how they can learn more about Artist Inc. And so with that, Stephen, you're the man of the hour. Please tell us, what is Artist Inc.? How'd you hear about it? Chris Dahlquist, of course, is on the call. Let our community know what it is and how they can get involved.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can all see my screen. It should have a picture of Chris doing what she does so well here in Des Moines. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for that reflection, Kate. That really it's really terrific to see so many different organizations here. And one of the things I love about Artist Inc. is that it speaks directly to these journeys that Andrea and Beau are sharing today. So it's one of the great joys of this program. In January, so a little bit about Artist Inc. In January 2018, really after a pretty long process, 8-month process, the Arts Festival adopted a strategic plan that included 4 strategic priorities, and one of those addressed inclusion efforts. Given that we are in the arena of creatives and arts organizations, we specified our space to engage diverse segments of the community, using arts obviously as a catalyst and to further inspire individuals to find their creative voice. It's one of the things I loved about the words that came out of that plan was, we want to inspire individuals to find their creative voice. So as we continue to work on breaking down this priority along with the other 3 priorities that we identified, we came up to realize that all of our priorities were deeply interconnected. So for example, our strategy to play a leadership role in elevating the impact of the arts in our community, in our region, could not really go forward without engaging every segment of our community, right? We had to use that, we had to go to that inclusion effort. That to collaborate with artists for economic success, another priority, that we had to engage all the artists, not just a select few. So we also found that all of our priorities led us back to one truth, and that was support for the individual artist. That to support them and to help them with their success, that many of their priorities would also be successful. So Artist Inc. emerged as the catalyst for this success. From my perspective, what we were asking of ourselves was really to build a program for artists and that would help them reach their true potential. Privately, we all felt that we could take years and years and years to produce a program that would help artists reach their true potential. And as we also like to work efficiently and strategically with all of our organizations who are, short-staffed and so forth, we came to realize that the program already exists in Kansas City with the Mid-American Arts Alliance. So why not simply go to them and about bringing the program to Des Moines, a program that is 10 plus years in the making and is built upon data, good data, built by artists, a program that's built by artists for artists, and really possesses all the tenets and the strategic priorities that we were focused on. I'm glad you mentioned I'm on speaker view here, so I'm glad to hear you say Chris is here today. Chris Dahlquist, who has, a shout out to her, who has just been our angel, quite frankly, of guiding us through this entire strategic process and getting us to a place where we really feel comfortable about this program and helping us to bring the program here, because it's pretty astonishing. So, what specifically is Artist Inc? Well, it is a professional development training program for artists of all disciplines. The program provides cutting edge training seminars that address the specific daily business needs and challenges of artists. It's an 8-week program to sort of get in the weeds with you a little bit. It's an 8-week program. It's a seminar that's led by a team of trained facilitators. 2 are on our panel today. Beau and Andrea are on our panel today, and the rest of our facilitators, I think, are with us all today too. Christian Day, Julia Franklin, Matt Greiner, and Tiffany Johnson. The program is designed for up to 25 participants. They're selected through a competitive application process that looks at a few things. It looks at the quality of work. It looks at the readiness that the individual has for the program, and it looks at the diversity of the seminar cohort to ensure diversity and inclusion in all of its definitions are met. And that includes demographics, so gender, age, ethnicity, as well as artistic discipline, including every discipline. I know that there's people with the think about the Des Moines Arts Festival, cut straight to the chase about visual artists, but this is a program that's open to all artists in every discipline. Let me go to this. Yeah. So the sessions of the program include strategic planning, building a personal brand, writing about your work, budgets and financial planning, how to fund your practice, artist as an entrepreneur, sharing and talking about your work in the public space. There's a few more things that it covers as well, but that's the high level piece of it. So how do you apply? Artists can log on to our website, artistincdesmoines.art. You can find out a whole lot of information about Artist Inc. there. The application itself could not be simpler. Artists use submittable.com. I promise you this is easier than a Bravo grant application, just saying out there. Artist, you provide a completed application, a resume or a CV, and 4 artwork samples. And if you want to know more, we certainly are providing opportunities to learn more about it. We're hosting a What Works workshop on Wednesday, January 6th at 6:30 p.m. over Zoom. The What Works workshops are designed to give you a taste of the 8-week session and to measure, really if Artist Inc. is right for you. The January 6th workshop is going to be led by Chris Dahlquist. I talked about her a little bit earlier. Out of Kansas City, photographer, arts business strategist. There's information about the What Works workshop on our website as well. And it does require registration so that we can be sure that we have some online security pieces there. There's some other resources that are available to you. If you go onto the bravogreaterdesmoines.org website, there is on the regional cultural assessment page, There is the results of the work that Chris Dahlquist did here in our community that really got us to the place where we are today. One of the tactics that was recommended by the work that she did was to bring Artist Inc. here to our community, because it was exactly what we were looking for. We call it the action plan because it is, Chris gave it perhaps the longest name of any plan in the history of the world, the Action Plan for Professional Development and Capacity Building Program for Individual Artists in Greater Des Moines. As we all love our acronyms here in Iowa, you can't make an acronym out of that, so we just call it the action plan. But that action plan is available for you to review. It's great. It's great information, especially in this DEI space. There's some wonderful information in that plan. I encourage you all to go out there and to read it. And again, artistinc.DesMoines.art. There's information about Artist Inc., about our lovely, wonderful professional facilitators, about the What Works workshop and the application process.
Stephen, that is fantastic information. And I know that, while this is a critical dialogue about diversity, equity, inclusion in the arts community, we have a number of artists, in our audience who definitely want to learn about how they can participate in this. One of the things that you mentioned was Bravo. And so we would be completely, I would be remiss if I did not ask Sally Dix at this time to provide us more information about Bravo's role in Artist Inc. and any information that you'd like to share with us about Bravo, Sally.
Thanks for the opportunity. And Stephen, thanks again for bringing this program to life in our community. I'm super excited. I can remember having lunch with you and Chris at Hawk 250 years ago to get this ball rolling. And I'm so excited to see it happening. So thanks to both of you. So where does Bravo fit into this conversation is such a fraught question, because there's lots of opportunity, but there's also lots of weight to carry. So as I said at the beginning in my introduction, Bravo was formed primarily as a funder. That's where we come from. We're only about 15 years old in the community, so we're relatively new on the scale. I see Gateway Dance Theater on here. I know they're more than 40 years old. There's a wide range. Civic Music is on here, 100 years old. So there are arts organizations way, way further along than Bravo. We were formed primarily as a funder and have done that well, and it is important and critical work. It will remain our primary function for as long as Bravo exists. So everything I say after this is and. It's not or, it's and. What we've realized, though, is that individual grants to individual organizations is not enough to impact the community in the way that we think arts and culture can and should. And so we have, over the last couple of years, worked to redefine our structure a little bit, again, to always focus on that community investment piece, but we have also added in a layer that we refer to as community impact. And these are things that cannot be done by a single organization, that elevate arts and culture in new and different ways, that present the sector as more than, nice to have quality of life amenities, but really paint the picture of the sector as critical economic engines and critical drivers of all of the priorities that our region has identified. And we have been able to experiment a little bit and try some things. Our board has been gracious and generous in allowing us to invest in some projects that we might not otherwise have done. And we're learning as we go. But the idea is to be as inclusive as we can at that very 30,000-foot level. There's so much more art can do, and there's so many more ways art and culture can play in our region. So I think Daphne's going to queue up one of the projects. So Artist Inc. is one of our community impact investments. We were able to put dollars towards this because we know that Bravo isn't built to support individual artists. So this was a way that we could recognize and value through the regional cultural assessment work, the role of the creative economy, the critical role individual artists play, and get over our own barrier, which is that that's not what we do. So we're able to invest in this program and are proud. I think we were an early investor, proud to support that and see this come to life. We're also looking at other projects, other issues beyond the creative economy. We recently did this project, and Daphne is going to show a brief video called the Dream Cube. This was a project in collaboration with Mid-Iowa Health Foundation and several other foundations, the Polk County Continuum of Care, the Iowa Arts Council, the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines, and Capital Crossroads all invested in this. And we came together to leverage art to make visible a critically important community issue that I don't know if other people would have seen if not for this.
The Dream Cube, a monolithic structure of pillows stretching 8 feet high, illustrating and creating conversation around the promise of our youth, including those without a safe space to call their own. Through the intersection of art and action, we imagine a world where all young people have a home, a place of safety and comfort to lay their head and to dream more dreams. Will you see them hiding in plain sight? In our schools, on our streets? These exceptional humans with goals and futures at their fingertips and art layered in their eyes. Will you hear what they have seen and listen to believe? Sometimes comfort is simply feather soft, and hope is a smile. But if you look away, how will they dream? How will they dream?
Sally, thank you so much for sharing that on behalf of Bravo. I've seen it several times. I get chills every time I watch it. It's just a quiet reminder, but with a very loud voice, right, of things we need to be thinking about in our community. Just for the fun of it, you know, I'm going to give a few more shout outs. I don't want anybody to feel as though I missed them. Mary Chapman, thank you for attending today. Bottle and Bottega, you guys are amazing. Thanks for being here. Home Diddy, love what you do. Thank you for being here. Des Moines Metro Opera and Des Moines Ballet are also on this call. We do have a question that Alan has and would like to know, you know, Stephen, how far reaching are these opportunities for Artists Inc? Is this a Des Moines thing only? Is this a state of Iowa thing? How broad of talent are you trying to attract here?
Well, as broad as possible, right? That's one of the tenets, is trying to reach as many different individuals as we possibly can. Artist Inc. itself is in, I believe, 10 communities right now throughout the Mid-America Arts Alliance region. Des Moines will actually be the first out of region community to bring Artist Inc. to their community, which is a tremendous thing for us. I do believe that there's a couple of other communities that are teeing up to come into or to bring Artist Inc. to their community. So I think that number will increase. Chris could probably speak more directly to that than I can. In terms of Iowa right now, one of the parameters set with Artist Inc. is typically that artists need to be within an 80-mile radius of where we're where we're hosting Artist Inc. Obviously, COVID has thrown us everybody a loop. So in a typical year, we would be doing all of Artist Inc. In person, live, in a room. and working together. But unfortunately with COVID this year, it will be virtual. So, the question then comes up, well, why can't, if I'm virtual, if I can be anywhere in the country, then why don't I just jump on board? And I suppose the answer, at least for us, at least for right now, is we prefer to be in person. We prefer to work together. I mean, that's one of the great advantages of the cohort, is that they come together and they work together, and they develop personal relationships, and the work and the cross collaboration and the table, just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more inclusive. And that's what we want out of Artist Inc. eventually. We'll do the best we can over Zoom in March, but when it comes together. But our goal is to keep it local for right now. If it grows beyond that, then it can grow beyond that. But the idea is, if you lived outside the metro area, would you be willing to drive to Des Moines every Monday night for a 3-hour session, right? And so that may not be advantageous. I know that if you're I'll give you an example too. If you're in Western Iowa, I believe Artist Inc. is in Omaha, right? Chris, shaking your head, yes, no? Omaha, so they're...
I think they're on a hiatus right now, but
Okay.
Omaha has been on, yeah.
Right. So there is some opportunity there in that part, and at least on that side of the state. And then as we, continue, depending on how successful Artist Inc. is, then, could possibly look beyond our metro area.
There are some Artist Inc. opportunities for people that don't live in a community that is hosting the full 8-week session, and they would be on the Artist Inc. Website. So, like shorter weekend long opportunities. It's called Artist Inc. Express. So you might look for that at artistinc.art.
Hi, Chris. Good to see my fellow Kansas City friend. I moved here from Kansas City a few years back. I'm an Iowa, basically an Iowa native myself. So it's really great to see you here. Thank you so much. One thing I did want to mention, and then we're gonna go back to Beau here in just a second. But Mary Chapman gave a nice clap to the Des Moines Arts Festival for engaging in this conversation. But I want to make sure this audience knows that Stephen and myself and this group have had a number of in-depth conversations. We know that this is not enough. This is not the beginning and the end. This is the beginning of a journey, and the journey was started some years ago with a very high level awareness of what needs to happen, but realizing that there is an exponential need to increase the urgency and the action, the intentional action by how we get there. And so, Mary, thank you for the acknowledgement, but I do want to make sure everyone on this call knows that we all know that there's a lot of work to be done, and things don't change with an event or a conversation, but it's an ongoing work in progress. It's an intentional and strategic path that has to be taken. And I think all of us are committed to that today. So, Beau, I know that you have some interesting work going on at Mainframe. Would you like to share that with this group?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, thank you for bringing it up, Kate. Tying into my consulting practice, especially as it applies here in Des Moines, and tying back to sort of what I was talking about before, this practice of intention, practice of curiosity. So I'm not creating something that nobody needs or wants. So I spent the first few months, I moved here September of 2019. The first few months just meeting people and getting a sense of what's happening here, what's the culture here, how can I be helpful with the skills that I have, and to help produce something that feels authentic to the community and also an additive to the community that can be embedded with that intention. So I'm having conversations with Siobhan Spain at Mainframe. I love the work that she does. Her background, I love what Mainframe is doing. Had a lot of conversations just about, what opportunities there are here for professional development, for funding, for, all the things that helped me be successful as a composer and public artist in Boston. I was asking as an artist and a composer, I was also asking as an arts administrator and consultant to kind of get a sense of what's happening here. And similar to what Chris was finding and what Bravo's finding, what Steven's finding, is that there are a lot of gaps. And so the way in which Siobhan and I sort of are approaching it is creating an incubator for 5 artists. Those artist fellows receive really intense coaching from me and also workshops that are strategically placed over a 4-month period. And I'm inviting in the most recent one. The workshop was led around community development, but it was led by Jennifer Drinkwater from Iowa State and Emmett Phillips Jr., who's over at Oak Ridge. And they both have a really rich and vibrant community engagement process and strategy that was very much complementary to each other. And so the goal, if I could, can I share? Oh, I can. I'm going to share just a little bit of information to give you some visuals. Thank you, Daphne. Are you seeing this? Okay, so this is just a 1-page fact sheet. I'm not going to read through all of it, but just to give you a sense of what we're trying to do and who these fellows are. The overall intention of this particular professional development was to sort of promote artists through experiential learning, through projects that are intentionally creating and paving a way for collaboration across disciplines and across organizations and institutions. Then going back again to your question, Kate, earlier about well, what does intention look like in practice? And I gave an example of, how to cultivate curiosity through a vibrant conversation and to promote empathy. Sometimes that is also how you develop the application process, because sometimes, and I appreciate that the Artist Inc. is a very easy application, because an application sometimes can be a barrier in and of itself. It can be actually exclusive in that sort of way. And so it was a very easy application, but then also we were collecting demographic information. We wrote in the application too that this is for BIPOC artists. This is a way to offer very, very deep and meaningful coaching and professional development to a select group of artists to get them into the community, teach them some of the things that sometimes they're excluded from in terms of networking, in terms of building relationships with organizations. And so we see Cameron Gray, Chrissy Jensen, DK, Amanda Tate, and Jill Wells are our 5 artists for this first round. It's a first of a 2-part pilot, and we're piloting again in 2021, and then hopefully creating something that will really work in tandem with Artist Inc. as well. We're creating this. I didn't know that it was actually Sally Dix came to an information session. She's like, do you know Stephen King? I'm like, no, I mean, I've heard of him. I've read about him, but I have not yet met him. She's like, you should talk to Stephen. He's doing some really interesting things as well. And so that was a really, really great connection, Sally. Thank you. And so Stephen and I had a great conversation, and it is not the same exactly as Artist Inc. It's building on how to build your business practice as an artist, but approaching your practice more from an entrepreneurial mindset, like thinking about what kind of project do you want to do as an artist? Who might you want to collaborate with? What are the values that are driving you? And how can you use those values and those skills and the project's intention to build meaningful relationships that will amount to, expanding your audience engagement, to pulling in maybe donors that you wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to, and building that sort of practice. And from these five fellows, we have a range from an actual art project that is going to be staged throughout the city to actually building out a nonprofit or an organization, or building a project that could then be embedded in another organization. So we're about halfway through now, so it's a very exciting thing.
Oh, thank you. That is, I love this. And I'm so glad that you shared that with our audience. Beau, you know, if you would be willing to, in the chat box to everyone, let this group know how they could get in contact with you professionally if they wanted to convene with you at some point and collaborate in the future. I thought it'd be great if you could put your information to the audience. You know, Dr. Wilson, there's a comment here, and I'm going to apologize if I pronounce your name incorrectly, Abina. I'm not sure if you have any relationship to Negus, who is with Urban Dreams, but if so, love to catch up with you afterwards. But Abina wrote a comment, Dr. Wilson, about being from Des Moines. You know, she describes herself as gifted and Black, but this is the perfect opportunity to have this conversation. She feels that our community has a tradition of possibly ignoring homegrown artists of color. And I've heard that from others who are Des Moines natives. And what are your thoughts?
Well, first, I just want to encourage her or anyone else that may be feeling that way here in Des Moines. Because, and this is not attempting to be religious, but you know, there's a famous Bible passage that talks about how Jesus went to his own and his own knew him not. And I have lived in several states. I'm from New York, lived in Georgia, lived in Florida, lived in California, and now I'm here. And I lived in Virginia for a short period of time. And I found that everywhere, that there's something about being in your home where people know you, where it's hard for people to expand their view of you. And so often, you know, when I first became a novelist, it was hard to get the people who I grew up with, people from my hometown, to buy my work, to really see me as this, you know, national, international author or whatnot. Whereas there were other people from all over, you know, sending me, and even out of the country, sending me emails like, oh, I love your work. And like the people locally are just like, no, I haven't gotten it. Okay, cool, whatever, you know? So I think that there's something to be said in general about people's reluctance to change their view of you. And then when you have something like, you know, we all know that racism exists. So when you have already that sense of people not wanting to really shift how they view you, and then you have additional factors and barriers like racism, like institutional racism or systematic racism, then that adds to the pot of just not being able to really grow and bloom where you are planted. And so I think one of the things that's great about this call is that this Zoom, so I used to be on calls, is that we do have so many organizations on here and movers and shakers on here. And I am hoping that with this conversation, you know, and we keep talking about collaboration, that more organizations that are in the art here in this city are more kind of responsive and looking forward to and creating and generating opportunities to collaborate, opportunities to create new things that we haven't seen here before in the past. I love what Beau is doing. I love what various groups are already doing here, as such as Bravo and whatnot. But more and more of that, you know, I'm definitely open at Grandview to using that platform to create new opportunities for people in the community. That was one of the things, and I know I keep bringing up Pyramid, but that was the cool thing about our collaboration, is that for that particular production, half of the cast were students and half of the cast were community members, community artists. And so opportunities like that, where we can reach in And one thing I noticed when I first moved here is that we're kind of circulating the same artists, for the same events and whatnot, and not really open it up to new people who maybe haven't ever worked with that particular company before, or maybe we just are new to that particular industry. I know we get used to kind of what works, but us also seeing the beauty in growing and developing talent. Just one comment about that. So we had this one student at Grandview who had never acted before in her life. And Tiffany saw something really great about her. She saw that she had the ability to grow. She was a senior in college, and Tiffany worked with her and developed her so that she could play in this play. And I think sometimes us doing that extra work to develop people, and not just assuming that if people don't already have it or they're not already where they need to be, then they can't get there. So I definitely think that these various opportunities that are sprouting up right now that allow development, instead of people already having to be at the top, but how do we then grow those people? And if they're missing something, if they need a little bit more development, how do we mentor them and get them there?
I mean, I love that. Can I respond to that really quick? Kate?
Yeah, go ahead, Beau.
Step on your, okay. I just think that that's so beautifully said. And I think that it speaks to this idea of individualized instruction. And again, going back to equity, like equity is different than equality, that you need to address certain inequities that have been cultivated over generations to provide an extra stepping stone or an extra ladder, or an extra whatever it is that needs to happen. And that's individualizing different artists or humans' experiences to make sure that they're able to reach that same benchmark, even though and giving that extra attention or coaching or whatever that is. That's such a great example of addressing inequity. And I think that's beautiful. Thank you.
Beau, thank you so much for sharing that. I agree. I couldn't agree more with your statement, Beau. That is, and Dr. Wilson, you are getting celebrated right now for your comments, and I echo those celebrations here on this call. There are lots of ways I think that we're going to start seeing our community become more involved, and provide those lifts, those opportunities, creative ways of making sure, not hoping for the best, but intentionally making sure that we're inviting, from an inclusive perspective, everyone to have a seat at the table, right? That's what this conversation is about. And Sally, I think that Bravo is going to continue to have a role in this way for our community. The journey has already began, and would you be willing to share a few of the other things that Bravo has done in regard to community impact, and where you might see Bravo's role going in the future?
Sure. A couple of other projects Bravo's invested in through this community impact work. Not super sexy, but one of them is an economic impact study. We know that the dollars matter, and being able to tell the story of how much revenue is generated through arts and culture is sometimes a gateway to a deeper conversation about what really matters about arts and culture. So funding the economic impact study. Stephen mentioned the regional cultural assessment. I hope that everyone on this call is aware of it. Bravo does not have a marketing department, so sometimes we do good work that doesn't get seen by as many people as we'd like. But this was work that we leveraged on behalf of the community, fully funded by Bravo, to make sure that we have clarity on how arts and culture align with all of the region's priorities. Arts and culture cannot be seen as separate from achieving regional objectives. It has to be seen as integral too. And that regional cultural assessment was completed in 2017, but I believe that the 4 pillars still stand. The 4 priorities, the four ways in still stand. And so I would encourage everyone to look at that and continue to use that as a platform to amplify your work in the community, to make sure that you're lining up with that. We've funded a couple of interesting projects. We're really excited. I'm sure lots of people in the community are about the Urban Dreams community garden that they're putting in. The courtyard, it's not a garden rather, but the courtyard that Urban Dreams is putting in. Instead of putting in a swing set, we were able to provide funding so that they could have instruments, interactive instruments for people to play and interact with while they're there, bringing music and culture to that space, partly 90% because it's a great project, but partly because of Bravo's investment. Urban Dreams was actually able to leverage the funds that they received from Bravo to receive a grant from Variety, and they're able to get much more, many more instruments than they had originally planned. So we seek to come in as a partner. And I think really, Kate, as far as what's next for Bravo, we have an opportunity to lead by example. We are a highly visible organization, and we, I believe, have a leadership role to play on behalf of the sector. We don't produce programs. We don't put theater productions up there. We're not doing musical productions. Our role to amplify the arts and culture sector is to catalyze these conversations. Our role is to put Beau and Stephen together and turn you loose. Our role is to ensure that the organizations we are funding are examples of best practices in the field and doing the best that they can. And so that's some of what our role is and what our future holds. We're proud of being able to amplify voices where we can, and creating connections and really catalyzing the future we want to see, I think, is what we're shooting for.
I love that, Sally. I really appreciate the work that you do and that Bravo does on behalf of the arts, culture, and heritage community here in Des Moines. You know, one thing I will say about Bravo serving on the board is that Sally's not afraid to push the boundaries and be creative in regard to how Bravo moves forward into the future. So I definitely want to thank you for that work. Stephen, you know, we have probably about 15 more minutes. I'm watching for questions from people. If anyone has questions that they'd like to have answered here, please write that in the chat box. One of the questions, though, that has been presented that Stephen, I'll let you answer, is about our youth in our community. How are we going to create that pipeline, the interest? How are we going to, you know, one of the things that I hear our community talk about all the time is talent retention, talent attraction, retaining our pipeline here in the Des Moines community for the workforce ready Iowa. We want to make sure our artists and our musicians and our creative folks are also staying in our community and providing all the amazing gifts that they have to offer. How does the Arts Festival play a role in attracting our youth and getting them involved?
That's a fantastic, fantastic question. Because it is truly can be a challenge, right? Let me answer it. And I'm so glad you asked that part at the end about how the Arts Festival, because I'm not sure I have the answer for all the other, right? Because it's sometimes we have our blinders on, at least right now. So let me answer it this way. One of the challenges that the Arts Festival has with regards to art specifically, visual art specifically, is that we are a very well-known, highly celebrated art fair. And we get there because we are a juried art fair. And as traditions with the art fairs across the country, it's a blind jury process. And so how do we, especially with the conversation that we're having today, how do we provide opportunity? We call it a seat at the table. How do we provide a booth at the festival? Could be another way of saying the same thing, but still keep the integrity of the jury process in place. Well, we have, I know Mary's on this call. Mary is on our board, as well as Angela Jackson. We've had some conversations about how we do that. And so not to get really too much in the weeds about that, but where our real focus has shifted over the last year, as we've talked about inclusion, is looking at our youth. how do we encourage our youth both in the K through 12 level with our student art exhibition? How do we leverage that program? And we've had some, frankly, some great success with that. I can say, so 3 years, of course, 2020, and we didn't have a festival. So it kind of messed up our plans, obviously. But we took a really hard focus on our K through 12 program, our student art exhibition program. And we increased from 2, I'll call, inner city schools to 16 in our program of being able to give kids opportunities to showcase their work at the Arts Festival. The other program we have is the Emerging Iowa Artists Program. So that is for students who are attending school, college, universities. And we plan to take the same concept, the same plan. We had planned to do that for 2021, but of course with COVID, we have invited all the artists that were juried in for 2020 to come back in 2021. So our plan is delayed slightly, but we hope to and plan to extend that same energy, that same concept that we were successful in doing with the student art exhibition, and extend that to young artists that are studying art and working through art in the college level, to give them more opportunity at the Arts Festival. And how do we reach a broader cohort in that? So there's a lot of, there are a number of things happening on that end as an arts festival can affect. And then of course, there's also the Artist Inc. program. There is a minimum age with Artist Inc. at 18, but you still, I call that young, at least, certainly for me. So anyone 18 years, I believe, or over 18 can participate in Artist Inc.
Stephen, thank you so much for that. Dr. Wilson, did you have something you wanted to comment on?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and put out there an opportunity. A part of my my endowment is that I do a summer program for high school students when it comes to creative writing. And this past year, because with COVID, of course, we weren't able to do it. So one thing that we are shifting is that in 2021, we are going to make the program virtual. And we are moving it from just being a summer program to an all year around program. So basically my goal is to allow time for the writers to write a completed manuscript that we would digitally publish, so that as they go on to college or whatever they're doing next, they already have something published that they can put on their resume that can, kickstart their career, whatever it is that they want to do. And so the writing projects, they can be fiction, they can be nonfiction, they can be plays, screenplays. We're gonna just open it up where that person can create, their own truth in writing. And so we will kick that off this summer. And I'm putting together the nuts and bolts about it, over winter break and over early spring. Now there are registration costs, but that's another way in which, some of the organizations here, if you want to do a scholarship or sponsor a student or something like that, definitely we can talk about how that can happen. So, and I think when we talk about reaching out to, how do we get those people who normally don't know about this stuff, I think a big way is, word of mouth is always the biggest way to find out about things. I think sometimes we just don't share the information because maybe we don't, maybe we personally hear about something, but we're busy, we're doing other things. But I think sharing the information with others so that it can be shared so it gets to that particular community. Because sometimes we may not know someone who needs it, but maybe if we mention it to someone else, and then that person, knows other people within that community that they could share it with, or, someone else that could that. So I think a part of it, when we don't know how to get into those communities, is really about continuing that verbal chain until it gets there. Because a lot of times people may, even if you're on social media, if you're not connected to certain people, you don't see certain advertisements. So, based on the algorithms, they only show you certain things. So I think continuing to share till it gets to that community is a great way to continue to get that word out. So yeah, I will put my information in the chat box. So if anybody wants to reach out to me about more information about our writing program for high school students, and we do sometimes accept middle school students if they are kind of a little bit more mature and can kind of handle that level of writing. Also, if anyone's interested in supporting or sponsoring or doing a scholarship, you can also reach out to me.
Fantastic. And how did you know that that's exactly what I was going to ask you to do, is to please put your contact information available for anyone that would like to get in touch with Dr. Wilson. You know, in the last couple of minutes that we have, you know, there've been some comments about equity and liberation and really how we take this further. And Mary, I know you you have a comment you'd like to share. So one, I want you to be able to share with our audience the thoughts that you have. But Mary, would you be willing also to talk about your perspective in regard to, you know, how do we move from equity to liberation, or how do we continue this forward?
Well, that's a good question, Kate, and I don't know if I have an answer for it because it's so individualized in a conversation that we're all having, and doing that personal self-assessment, you know, assessing the space that you're in and how what you do impact in terms of inclusion and reaching out and learning more about what's going on. But, you know, art, just the arts, all of the dimensions of art is a connector of people and a connector of ideals and thought. And so it becomes really a strong vehicle to do that, to connect and to learn about the differences and how, and the similarities. Like I said, it becomes that connector. But I guess, you know, all I can add is that the conversation that we have had this afternoon has, you know, touched all of the elements in terms of actualizing the conversation. And I think that's what's important, is that the pearls of thought that were mentioned today, you know, taking away, what can I take away and act upon what I've heard and what's been shared. So I'm encouraged by that, encouraged by just the diversity that is on this, within this conversation. And so we need to continue reaching out in our own personal networks and sharing this, and that's how it can continue to grow. But I also wanted to add about the Black Stories Project at the Arts Center, which that exhibit will end in, I think, January. And if you haven't had an opportunity to tour that exhibit, then I encourage you to do that. And I encourage you to reflect on what elements inspires an experience or a story as it relates to experiencing that exhibit. So I think it's all experiential in terms of how you share. I'm sorry, you probably hear the background of my mother. I'm with my mother, and you know, no filters, but I just want to, but thank you for asking that question. And I hope I've said something that has, you know, been helpful. But the bottom line is, act upon what you've heard and not just sit upon this knowledge and connect with your networks. That's the authentic way of addressing what we've been talking about today.
Mary, thank you so much for your comments and for being here today. I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with Mary, but our community is so fortunate to have her here and provide so much knowledge and kind guidance to so many people. And you know, I don't know you that well personally, but I can tell you I love you and I love the work that you do. And so from the Des Moines community, I thank you for all that you do for these conversations everywhere, Mary. I would like to say that what better way to circle back, because, you know, art in all of its many expressions, right? In all of its diversity. And whether that means cultural diversity or diversity of artistic expression and medium, art allows us to be vulnerable. It allows us to speak truth and allows us to have common ground and intersectionality with each other. And so, you know, a seat at the table means different things to different people. But we thank you so much for joining us today in what we hope is just the beginning of more conversations to come. And so with that, you know, have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for being here with us for, again, such a meaningful dialogue. We hope that you'll stick with us and attend future events to continue this conversation. So have a wonderful day. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
I had to kick people out. I was like, you need to hang up. Okay, stop recording.